So that hail risk for today are storms out in Nebraska. You can see that we've got some larger hail up near Montana and Wyoming, and then we've got that large hail that goes all the way into places like Minneapolis and down into Iowa. So that's where we're watching for the largest hail today. Tomorrow that shifts down into places like Kansas and even into northern Oklahoma. So let's take a look at your max forecasted hail size for today. We're expecting up to tennis ball size hail today, that 2.5 inches in size, so larger than the size of a golf ball, up to tennis ball size hail. And where are we seeing that at? We're seeing that in places like Cheyenne, Colby, Kansas, into the western side of Nebraska and southern side of Wyoming. Zooming in here now to the map and putting on our risk values here. I think that the greatest risk for large hail will be anywhere from places like Minneapolis all the way down to Cheyenne and Valentine, I hope I'm saying that correctly, South Dakota. So there's your risk levels for hail. Moving on to your wind forecast here, you're going to see that the risk goes up for your high wind speeds today. Again, because we talked about that bowing structure earlier today, right? We've got that high wind speed up in places like Kansas, Colorado, southern Nebraska, and then we've got another little pocket of high wind into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Iowa today. And you'll see why we've determined this in your future radar map here in just a few minutes. But we do have some pretty decent risks for high wind greater than 75 miles an hour. So I think we're talking about 75 to maybe 80 miles an hour in these areas. Everyone else highlighted in this light blue color from Billings all the way through the Dakotas and then up to portions of the Midwest. That is where we're seeing 65 to 75 mile per hour wind speeds today. So still pretty significant. Now let's talk about that tornado risk today, because that is also on the board. It's a level 1 for most of us, highlighted here in green. However, that risk is increased as you go up into Minnesota, Sioux Falls, Minneapolis, Duluth, all included or near that level 2 risk. And what we're going to see here is we're going to see a long line of storms in this area, and those tornadoes that we could see will be embedded supercells, so embedded tornadoes in this long line of storms. These are very difficult to catch, okay? These are very difficult to spot on the radar, and it'll be coming later in the evening. So we'll have to really keep an eye out for these storms that are going to be pretty impactful today. Got a few questions on here for places like Des Moines and Omaha. Yeah, here, let me see if I can move this map down. I can. Okay, so here's a look at Iowa. You can see your tornado risk here, highlighted here in green. So anyone in Iowa today is going to be in that green category, that level 1 category. Moving over to Nebraska here, also a level 1 category, highlighted there in green. Great questions. Thanks for joining us today. Let's see, who is this by? Colin was asking those questions about Des Moines and Omaha. Yeah, we appreciate you jumping on here today. Alrighty, moving on. Let's take a look at your risk, your future radar here. So we talked about where the highest likelihood for those hazards, those hail, high wind, tornado hazards. But let's talk about wind, timing here. This will start in the afternoon hours, especially out in places like Montana, Wyoming. We'll start to see a few little storms pop up here. The storm coverage will be more widespread, increased as we head into the late afternoon and evening hours. So look at this line of storms that is starting to form, paralleling 35, so just to the west of 35. Out in Minnesota here, you're going to see this continue to stretch farther down to the south, right, as it heads into Minneapolis. So let's talk about Minneapolis timeline here between about 7 and 8:30, 9 o'clock. Okay, that's whenever we're expecting the strongest storms to come through. Remember, in this long line of storms right here, we'll have little embedded tornadoes. And what we call this, you'll often hear a meteorologist describe this as spin-up tornadoes. Now, remember, a spin-up tornado does not mean a weak tornado. They can still do some pretty impactful damage to your property or maybe to your area. And that's possible, okay? A spin-up tornado just means that it drops down very quickly and then pulls back up into the cloud very quickly. Drops down quickly, pulls back up quickly. So we could see a long line of warnings here just to warn for that potential risk, right? We talk about this quite often. This is a very common sight, but that is something to note today. We'll have a few more storms and maybe some supercells as we head down into places like Iowa. Remember, there is a tornado risk down into the northern portion of Iowa here, into Nebraska, and even into portions of Wyoming and the western side of Nebraska, northeastern side of Colorado. Now, this will continue through the late night hours tonight and into early tomorrow morning. However, I'm not expecting that storm risk to go too far into the early morning hours. Maybe still some high wind as we get down into Kansas from these storms tomorrow morning. But for the rest of us, we'll be mostly severe clear by early tomorrow morning. But look at northern Kansas. You're still going to get some storms down along I-70 by early tomorrow morning. One more look at the radar here, focusing more on Minnesota because that is where we have that tornado risk for tonight or this evening tonight. And there's a look at your radar as we head into early tomorrow morning. Alrighty, before we move on, do we have any more questions or any specific areas that you want me to cover here? I don't see that on here, so we will go ahead and move on to, I think we're going into tomorrow's outlook. Okay, let's talk about Tuesday now. Tuesday, we shift down into places like Kansas, central Kansas, and the path for storms here, southern side of KC, Omaha, Des Moines, also included in that risk for storms on Tuesday. So Colin, we hope to see you back here on Tuesday. We've got storms that stretch all the way out into Colorado, Wyoming, and then southern Nebraska tomorrow as well. Even Oklahoma City included in this risk as well. And great question, great timing, Michael, here asking about storms out in KC tomorrow. Yeah, that's definitely possible. You guys have a level 3 risk on the southern side of Kansas City or maybe just to the south of the city itself, but you're in a level 2 risk across the entire city in Kansas City. So great question. We appreciate you guys jumping on here. Hunter, I love it. Can you make it hail in Denver? Well, we have a risk for storms in Denver. Unfortunately, I can't control what actually happens there. But what we've been seeing here lately is that storms form right around or to the west of Denver. They go up, but they actually intensify farther out to the east. So it's like you guys get the rain, but the severe stuff is to the east of Denver. And that's what we've been seeing here lately. It looks like that's what we're going to see tomorrow as well. So we'll keep an eye on it. Denver is definitely one of those areas that will surprise you. You'll have a marginal risk or maybe no risk at all, and then all of a sudden massive hailstorm. So we are always keeping our eye on Denver because that's one that will, storms will kind of come out of nowhere. Wednesday we have a risk for Dallas, Oklahoma City, storms all the way up into the Midwest on Wednesday. And then Thursday we have another risk for storms out on the East Coast. So there's your storm risk. Let's talk about temperatures just really quick here. We're warmer today than what we were yesterday in places like Oklahoma and Texas. We are a bit warmer than what we normally see this time of the year out in the Four Corners and up into the plains. So we've got that warm air that will continue to stick around through most of this week, maybe a bit cooler after all of these storms tomorrow in the northern plains. But yeah, a lot of us staying above average here. And that's going to be a common trend, right? We've talked about this over and over and over, and I like to show these maps to give you a heads up of what the summer is going to look like. Summer, what is this? The last week of June 21st through the 25th. It looks like we have a really good chance to stay above average through the Midwest and the East Coast. So let's say, here's how you read this map. Let's say temperatures are usually 80 degrees. That's your average in this area. Well, what this tells you is that we have a really high likelihood of being above average. So we're talking 82, 83, maybe 90s. And that's just an example of how to read this map, right? So what about as we head into July and August, we still have a really good chance to be above average throughout the rest of the summer as well. So just prepare for a hotter than usual summer. And I think that I got through all of your questions here. Let me just double check. Doug asking, any hail in Chicago soon? Yeah, here I can look at the risk for, I think that we go into the Midwest tomorrow. Let me pull that up really quick. It's just going to take 1 minute here. Less than a minute, I promise. Alrighty, here we go. Here's your risk for tomorrow. Yeah, you guys are right on the marginal risk in Chicago. This is for Tuesday. This is for tomorrow. So yeah, you may have a chance for storms. You kind of are like Denver, where you're just right on the edge. So something could happen, but it's a pretty low risk. Most storms are going to stay to the west of you. What about Wednesday. Okay, now Wednesday, Chicago has a better chance for storms. On Wednesday, you could get some of those hailers and high wind out in Chicago. So we'll be keeping an eye on this. Remember, this time of year, without a very strong storm system up ahead, so basically those upper level winds are pretty weak right now. They're not terribly impressive. So things can change very, very quickly in the forecast for this time of the year. So we'll be watching that for you. And if anything changes, we'll keep you updated on our forecasts over the next few days. Great question, Doug. Well, we appreciate everyone jumping on here today. Make sure that you follow us on all of our social media sites. So we are on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. What did I miss here? We're even on Spotify. We have a podcast on Spotify and on YouTube, so check that out as well. It's called Hail Chatter. But if you're interested in a storm map that we mapped over the weekend, that we mapped 2 years ago, you can give us a call at 855-334-4245 or email us at info@hailtrace.com or even head over to our website, hailtrace.com. I'm meteorologist Taylor Cox. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you back here, same time, same place tomorrow.